there. Chalkboard embellishments are really popular this fall for scrapbook pages, so I thought I'd see if I could make my own. I have some chalkboard paint from Martha Stewart. I bought this when I was taking the art class over at 2Ps. Last spring. It's a great class. It's still available. And we use this on a background for a page. I want to see, though, how it would work with doing some of my own embellishments. I'm also going to be using some white markers and other things, and I'll get to those a little bit later on. But first of all, we need to paint up some cardstock. So what I've done is, I'm going to go ahead and get some of this paint out here. I have cut a number of shapes using my Cricut, and you could use any die cutter that you had, or you could use punches, or you can just cut rectangles or circles or whatever you want. I've cut them out of two different things. This is some paper tray ink cardstock. Their cardstock is very heavy, and I happened to use black. I had some of it, and so I thought I would try the black and see how that worked, but you don't have to use black. In fact, you can use white cardstock. It doesn't really matter what color. For the Stampin' Up, I went to one of my discontinued colors, since it doesn't matter what color, and decided I would just use up some old green paper that I really didn't have much other use for. I'm also trying some watercolor paper, and I've done enough experimenting to know that this is not going to be my favorite medium because of the texture in the watercolor paper. Even if you paint the very smoothest sides, it's still not going to be, in my opinion, the best choice, but it's heavy, and what you want is a fairly heavy paper, and that's why I went to the paper tray ink paper. Now you can paint via a brush or a sponge. I did a little sample here, and this one was painted with a brush, and you can probably see some of the brush strokes. And this happens to be that green cardstock. This is also the green cardstock, and it was painted with a sponge, so it's a little bit smoother. So you can use, whichever way you want to paint them. And let me paint up a couple of them, and then I'll show you how I decorated them.
Now my preference is to paint with a brush, and of course you can use either one. And as you'll see later on, it's 2 coats helps, and you have to have 2 coats on these lighter colored papers. But the green paper, you pretty much need a second coat, but you could get by with just 1 coat on the black paper. They go very quickly. Of course, I have this speeded up a lot, but still, it's a pretty fast process. Now I have the white there. You can see it definitely has to have more paint. The green, you can see a little bit of that green through it, and the black just has 1 coat, but you can see through that a little bit, but not much. I mean, really, since it's black on black, it's going to look good. Now let's decorate some of these embellishments. I have 2 coats now on this pinked circle, and I'm using the Uniball Signa white gel pen. These are available at a lot of the craft stores, including Archivers, and you can mail order them as well. I've punched a circle that's a little bit smaller than the outside edge of my pink circle, and I'm going to use that as a guide to mark my circle going around. And I have this video showing in real time, so it seems slow, but this is the speed that you want to use this Uniball pen. You don't want to go really fast with it, or you won't get a nice even coat. That's the only thing about them, is you have to go a little bit slower when you're drawing or writing. And I think that that pinked edge was cut with the Accent Essentials cartridge on the Cricut. Now I'm going to use a smaller circle in it in a little bit to add an inside circle once the white gel pen dries. You could do the same thing with squares. I have a scalloped square I cut with the Storybook cartridge on the Cricut. I've cut a square just with my paper trimmer that'll go on the inside, and I'm going around it with the white Uniball pen. And it gives the impression of chalk on a chalkboard. Again, going nice and slow to get a good coverage with the white gel pen. And don't worry, we'll speed up here in a little bit. Now this embellishment, and I cannot remember, I'm sorry, which cartridge I used to cut this with. I think it was Accent Essentials. But anyway, I'm just doing a freehand draw around this just to kind of give it a casual effect. And of course you don't have to outline all of them, but that's a common look in the purchased embellishments. Now that one with the circle on the inside, after you give the white gel pen just a minute or two to dry, then you can go in with additional designs, and I'm just going to add a second circle. And I have sped this up since we have the hang of what's going on here. Now another thing that you can use to write on the chalkboard are Sharpie paint pens. This is a white paint pen. It says fine point. It's not really that fine. It's, you can see from the example there, it's more a little bit larger felt tip pen. You can still write on the chalkboard, and it looks a lot like chalk, and it goes very quickly. And I'm showing this in real time, and you'll see my writing here. You don't have to write that slowly to get a good coverage with the paint pen. It just takes a little bit of work to get the paint pen to start putting out white paint, but once you do, then it writes really nicely on the chalkboard paint. Another thing that you can do with the chalkboard elements, first let's look at these two. The one on the left only has one coat of black, and the one on the right has two coats. So you can see the right one had a little bit more gloss to it. This, the one on the bottom here has chalkboard paint, two coats, and the top one is just plain black cardstock. And I wanted to show you the difference if you just, forgot about the chalkboard paint altogether and just use black cardstock. You can still get a similar effect, but it's not quite the same. It doesn't have quite the same look. All right, I'm going to do some stamping using a Technique Tuesday set. The important thing about stamping on these, if you're doing embossing, is to use the embossing buddy, because the embossing powder really clings to this chalkboard paint. And I'm using white embossing powder. And I've stamped then two images. The one on the bottom is the chalkboard paint that has a nice sheen to it, and the one on the top just a plain flat matte cardstock. These two images, both on chalkboard paint, were stamped and embossed, some flower images that I had, and I'm going to color these with watercolor crayons from Stampin' Up. I've tried regular crayons, Crayola crayons, and they don't really adhere to the chalkboard paint. But the watercolor crayons go really well. Now I'm not going to add any water to these. I'm just going to use them as crayons. And once I got that yellow on there, I didn't like it very much. And I left that part in the video to show you you can actually color over these, because I ended up going over the yellow with a different shade of pink, and that showed up a lot better. So it's a good idea to practice maybe on some scrap with your colors and see what's going to show up really well on the black background. And the pink really popped on it. And working with the crayons, it's a little hard to keep inside the lines, but you can take a paper towel and go over the edges, and that'll get any extra mark or crayon off of the white, and it gets a nice finish. Now another thing that you can use are the colored pencils. These are not watercolor pencils. They're just regular ordinary colored pencils. I don't know if the watercolor pencils work. I don't have any of those, but I'm just using the regular Prisma colored pencils, and they work nicely to give the effect of colored chalk. And I decided this little embellishment needed a little bit extra, so I added some words to it. And this one, I'll probably leave the words until I actually use it on a layout, so I can customize it. That's the main reason you want to create these, is so you can customize them. Now these two are my favorites. I punched this with a regular border punch, then painted it with the chalkboard paint, and then I went over it with the paint pen for the dots on the top and the Uniball Signa gel pen for the bottom. So you can get some really nice effect on borders there as well. I also thought it would be handy to have some chalkboard paint covered cardstock ready to stamp, or punch and stamp in whatever design that I wanted for my layout. So I've taken some black cardstock, I purposely chosen black, and coated it with 2 layers of the chalkboard paint. The reason I used black is so that when I punch out my design, or cut the design with the Cricut, you'll see that the edges are still black. so I don't have to worry about covering those with paint. And so this is ready to decorate any way I wanted it to for a layout. And of course I can cut things in whatever size is appropriate for the layout. Here I'm using the paint pen the same way that I did on that border that I showed you earlier, and just putting a dot in each of the little scallops. And the paint pen dries very quickly. Now I'm going to take my black cardstock here that's already painted to the Cricut and then cut out a shape that would be appropriate for a particular layout. And then I can decorate this however I needed to. So it's really nice if you have some of this painted up, you can use it for your layouts, whatever size. You could use it for matting, lots of different things. Write on it, use the crayons, whatever you wanted for a particular project without having to make these up ahead of time. Now let's look at some of the final items that we have. The two borders, punched, painted, and then colored with either the paint pen or the gel pen, using some watercolor crayons, pencils. I used the watercolor pencils to write "Life is Good." Lots of options there for creating your own embellishments. Thank you for watching.